Hi, welcome everyone. We're just going to allow folks to come in over the next 2 minutes here, and then we'll go ahead and get started. This is the Extreme Heat and Community Resilience Grant Program Round 2 Guidelines session, hosted by the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. So thanks for being here. So a bit of housekeeping as we get started. Please send your questions using the Q&A function. So you might have to press on more to find the Q&A function, but at the bottom of your Zoom screen, if you use that, you can also utilize the like function if you want to upvote questions that resonate with you. So that's how we hope you participate in the Q&A function. So we will be trying to answer Q&A as you put Q&A questions in, and then we will have a Q&A section where we will try to address as many of your Q&A needs at the end, towards the end of this session. All right, and we'll go ahead and get started. Hi, my name is Braden Kay. I am with the Governor's Office of Land Use and Climate Innovation. I'm joined by many of my LCI colleagues who are here today and can introduce themselves as they come up and speak. This is the everything you need to know about the Round 2 Guidelines session. So in terms of what our agenda here is today, we will be going over the background of the Extreme Heat program. We will be reviewing the Round 2 guidelines. We have two members of our climate services team who will be going over a demo of how to determine the funding priority points that your project could receive. And then we'll have a question and answer session. And if we don't get to all of your questions today, we will be taking them in, developing official responses, and adding them to an ongoing question and answer sheet, FAQ, that will be on our website. So, as I mentioned, we have a lot of staff on here today who are all working on the grant program, and really appreciative of everyone being here today on our team. And thank you all for being here to learn more about Round 2 of the grant program. So, for a brief overview, Round 1, $32 million awarded. We have 45 grants in 23 counties across the state. And these were both planning grants and implementation grants. Now, Round 2, we have $27.5 million to grant out. The funding streams are the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is California's cap and trade program, and then monies from the Prop 4 climate bond that California voters voted on in November of 2024. Both of these infrastructure types provide opportunities to invest, or both of these funding streams provide opportunities to invest in infrastructure to extreme heat. So this is a little bit different from Round 1. Round 1 used general fund money and was able to fund a full suite of activities that included response activities, public health activities, awareness activities. Those are still eligible activities, but they have to be paired with an infrastructure project in this second round. So we have four guiding values that are really driving this second round of the program. Our first round had 10, and we now have reduced it to these four. And these four drive the questions that we ask you in the in the application and are really driving how we're going to be supporting the projects that are awarded. So that includes harm reduction, which is the need to reduce heat illness or heat death through the infrastructure and related programs that you're employing. Partnerships. So this is recognizing that effective solutions require both community knowledge and implementation capacity, and that there is a need for different entities to help you do that both implementation work and community knowledge work. Then there's belonging, ensuring that the infrastructure that is designed with and for the people who use it. And then lastly, lasting community benefits. So the idea here that investments should go beyond the immediate outputs of a single infrastructure project and help contribute to sustained change, ensuring that your community can develop momentum to put more infrastructure and more protection to extreme heat far into the future. So with belonging, the core idea here, this is one of our new values. So the idea here is that infrastructure only protects people if they feel safe and welcome using it. So for example, in a cooling center, if no one feels comfortable in that space or going to that space, they're not going to be able to have the benefits of the cooling. So in practice, belonging means that you're designing your project with the community. The project reflects who lives there. It's part of a trust building process, and it's part of making a place, not just a structure. And so this is something that we'll have sessions on. We'll have the grant guidelines has examples of belonging. We have an appendix B of the grant guidelines that really go into how to develop the belonging components of your project.
Thank you, Breda. And I will take it from here. Good morning, everyone. So in the next step of our understanding of the guidelines, I'll go over what kind of project types we're funding this round two. We have early infrastructure and advanced infrastructure. Early infrastructure is for communities that are early in their thinking of needs for heat infrastructure to protect their communities from extreme heat. So here the task is to develop a planning document for heat infrastructure that will take the form of a master plan or an extreme heat action plan. All of that, of course, focus on infrastructure. Now, that planning document needs to be accompanied by an infrastructure demonstration project. A test to add credibility to your planning document, to learn from it, and create a planning document in a way that is informed and grounded in real experience or what it means to implement heat infrastructure in your community. Now, on the other side of the coin, as you probably guess, advanced infrastructure is for those communities that have already done some sort of planning work, where they already have feasible plans for deploying infrastructure. Now, the term feasibility is very specific in our guidelines. It just means a set of requirements for you to prove that you, in fact, are ready to deploy. And because this project will be focusing mostly on the deployment of infrastructure for extreme heat, we want to learn from you. And what we are asking is to also produce a future implementation playbook. And really, the playbook is just an umbrella term for different written documents that you could create in order to set the stage for the next steps of your project. That could be a grant proposal, a set of guidelines, lessons learned, a proposal for capital expenditure, or it really is up to the applicant to propose what that can be and how best moves you forward towards the next step. All right. If we go through very high-level examples of what these projects could look like in real life, if your neighborhood is thinking about a cool corridor between key places, but you haven't done work or have done very little work, then the early infrastructure is for you. Then we assume that you are thinking on producing a master plan, and you are perhaps thinking about testing that with a shade structure demonstration project. Now, if you already have that master plan, then the advanced infrastructure is for you because you are thinking of deploying the cool corridor from the get-go. And it really is up to you, as I said, to plan what that playbook document could look like. All right, award amounts. And I'll spend a little bit of time guiding you through this slide, which is a little bit important. As a reminder, we have $27.5 million available for funding. If you are an early infrastructure grantee, you'll sign with the state a 30-month project contract, no exceptions. Your project amount that you can request is between $750,000 and $1.2 million. We are asking that the demonstration project is given between 25 and 60% of your total ask, that your co-applicant or partner gets an 8% of minimum of your project amount, and this to ensure that they are resourced appropriately and that they can contribute to the implementation of the project in very intentional ways. And belonging, which is the concept that Braden just explained, be given 4% of your total ask. Now, we are really emphasizing belonging as a budget requirement because our round focuses on infrastructure, and we want to make sure that those infrastructure solutions feel like they're assets of the community and people feel that they belong with these spaces, because that is the only way we make sure that they are used and are sustained for the long term. Now, if you are an advanced infrastructure grantee, then you'll sign with us for 48 months, no exceptions. You can request between $3 million and $4.5 million. A little bit more expensive because we are focusing on infrastructure. And for the same reason, we're asking you that at least 70% of that goes into the deployment of infrastructure. For your partners, we're asking that at least 6% of that be dedicated to them. And for your belonging approach, 2% of that amount goes to that. We are working with a 15% of indirect costs. However, the organizations or tribes that have a negotiated rate can very much use that and can work with us during the contracting process to honor that fee. Now, Ula, I'd like to go a little bit more in depth into what we mean by early infrastructure projects and the deliverables that are expected with that. As I said, early infrastructure is for you to plan and test. The two deliverables that you will be committing to is producing that planning document for future infrastructure paired with that demonstration project that tests your approach. So the planning document is a roadmap for heat resilient infrastructure in a defined area, and it could take a master plan shape or a stream heat action plan. The demonstration project has to be set up to generate insights needed to produce a credible and actionable planning document. So these both products have to talk to each other and really move through the project as a pair that makes sense of the other one. For the advanced infrastructure, we're talking to people that are ready to deploy and document. So as we said, it has to be informed by that the infrastructure that you'll pitch during your application process has to be informed by prior feasible planning. At the end of the contract, we want to see infrastructure that is fully deployed, operational, and has passed inspection. And for the future implementation playbook, it's a written deliverable that documents lessons learned and shows how to expand, replicate, or scale the project in the future. Now, in terms of what we will fund, to put it broadly, we'll fund solutions that fall into built environment solutions like cool payments, shading, passive and mechanical cooling, building upgrades, hydration stations, and transit shelters. And on the side of nature-based solutions, we are looking at all green infrastructure like urban forestry, green spaces, green stormwater infrastructure, or projects that integrate both. The guidelines have a long list of examples of the projects that we could be funding, but really here, what we're most interested in is that you don't produce something that is related to heat infrastructure, but that there is a clear logic on how the solution is interrupting extreme heat and the impacts that it has on people's health and well-being. All right, I will go through this one slide with a little bit more of detail because we are making a change from round one based on all the feedback that we received during our round one applications and also during our open comment periods. We learned that asking for a very detailed work plan was very burdensome for applicants, and those that were successful needed to rewrite their work plans with more accurate estimations in terms of their costs and also the order of activities that they needed to have. And because all of that happens before contracting, that is largely unpaid work. So in order to address that issue that we've been seeing during round one, we are proposing that we move in a slightly different direction. We'll provide a workbook template again. However, this one will be simplified, meaning that it will be used for your application purposes, potentially for contracting with minor details. And that in the first 3 months of your contract, you will have the opportunity to generate a detailed work plan based on research and with the backup of our technical assistance team. We hope that with that approach, grantees that are successful can have a better time setting up a roadmap for the future, and that work is recognized and of course paid. And on the side of the applicants, we are hoping that you don't develop a fully detailed workbook, but just give us enough information to ensure that the applicant is capable of implementing their vision. In other words, we're looking at this as the practical complement of your narrative. So that workbook template will be based on 5 tasks. The first one will be a project initiation, which mostly means how you're going to develop a detailed work plan. Task 2 will be community assessment and engagement. That basically will ask you how are you going to do the community level assessment or the site assessment if you're already planning on deploying infrastructure. On task 3, we just want to know if you know everything that you need in order to be shovel ready. Do you need permits? Do you need some sort of regional, local, SQL environmental reviews? And so we want to make sure that you have an idea of what it is to be required from you before you deploy. Task 4 is, of course, what are the steps that you need to deploy the infrastructure that you have proposed. And the planning policy is just those written documents that I was talking about in previous slides. I'm talking about this in very general terms. Of course, there will be slight changes on whether you are proposing an early or advanced. But what I want you to take away from this slide is that at contracting, we'll use the provided simplified template to get you to contract fast. And then post-contract, we'll work together to develop that comprehensive, detailed work plan and budget, following again a template that we will provide. And that not only will you have our support, but that activity will also be paid. In terms of funding priority points, Braden at the beginning stated very clearly that the larger part of our funding is coming from the climate bond, also known as Prop 4, and we're really honored to be a program that administers that. Having said that, that funding comes with very specific requirements. 40% of that funding needs to be I for disadvantaged communities, or DACs, and 10% of that needs to be distributed across severely disadvantaged communities. So in order to get to that and ensure that this investment is going to communities that need it the most, we are relying on funding priority points. So if the benefits of your project go to California Native American tribes, then you'll get 15 points. If those go to stacks, other 15 points. If they go to vulnerable populations, then 12 points. And if you are working on a project that will benefit disadvantaged communities, then that will be 10 points. As you can see here on the slide, you can only select one funding priority group. So the highest applicable value will be used, and up to a maximum of 15 points. Now, in order to be awarded those points, will go through a two-part assessment, meaning that points are not automatic because because you are working in a community that has these designations. So the first assessment is that you have to qualify as one of those groups and to demonstrate that the project provides meaningful and direct benefits to the community. Later on, you'll see from our colleagues from the climate assessment team on how this assessment will take place, and how you can have a preliminary idea of whether or not you'll get these priority points. During the pre-application, we'll give you a preliminary indication if your project is likely to receive any of the funding priority group points. This is preliminary because we assume that we won't have all the information. During the full application, we'll work on giving you a final determination, which will be made against all the 4 criteria for meaningful and direct benefits. Again, our team will go in detail what this means in a little bit. In terms of the team structure, we have the applicant team. We require a lead applicant and at least one co-applicant. Your applicant team can also be composed of contributors, supporters, contractors, and the specific meaning and requirements assigned to them are very laid out on the guidelines. For-profit entities, individual community members cannot be on the applicant team. And we always receive these questions. State and federal agencies cannot apply as part of your applicant team either. That include system-level offices representing higher education institutions. For example, the University of California President's Office, the California State University Chancellor's Office. Again, we have more examples on the guidelines of who are the eligible and ineligible applicant team members. A little bit about our co-applicant requirements. In this round, we are asking that all applicant teams have a lead applicant and at least one co-applicant. And this is to speak to the value of partnership that Braden introduced at the beginning. We are talking about infrastructure, and what we want to make sure is that the infrastructure solution is based on the lived experiences of the most affected communities. And so we want to make sure that the applicant teams have both the reach and the capacity to implement with the voices that shape that solution. So on the slide here, you can see the kind of co-applicant that you need on your team based on who you are as a lead team. For example, here, if you are a local or regional public entity, then we're asking you to integrate a co-applicant. It can be a CBO or a California Native American tribe. If you're an California Native American tribe, You're not required to have a co-applicant, though that is not to say that you can. That is always welcome. So I'm just gonna pause for a couple of seconds here so you can identify who you will be and who your co-applicants will be as a requirement. All right, a little bit of detail in terms of a CBO co-applicant and exceptions to the rule that I just spoke about. I'll explain why we have this specific requirement in a little bit, but if you are a lead applicant and need a CBO as a co-applicant, then your CBO that you choose as co-applicant must maintain a staff operational office within 100 miles of the infrastructure project site. Now, if your co-lead CBO doesn't meet if your co-applicant CBO doesn't meet that rule, they can always stay in the project. You must just add another qualifying CBO as co-applicant that fulfills the office requirement. We've received a lot of comments on this requirement, both positive and also constructive. And the reason why we set up this is because we heard from a lot of you that you wanted to make sure that the funding also created lasting capacity on the ground. And if we have regional or national CBOs coming on to support, they also had a way to build capacity for local CBOs. So we hope that this is a good balance to meet the requirements and that you understand the feedback that is come from the collective. A coalition cannot be a substitute for a CBO to meet this requirement. So it always has to be a CBO. Now we understand that especially in rural areas, this is going to be a hard requirement to meet. We've made an exception only for early infrastructure projects that if you are a lead applicant and you can't, if you're a CBO that can secure a local or regional public entity or tribe as co-applicant, you might still apply if you provide a justification letter, a letter of support if possible, and integrate partnership development activities in your work plan. And then I'll pass it to my colleague Angelo for the next slide.
Thanks, Kelly. Hi, everyone. I'm Angelo Rosayo, and I'm an Assistant Adaptation and Resilience Planner with the grants team on the Extreme Heat Program. So if you've been with us since our City of Tucson joint presentation, thank you for listening to this again. And if this is the first time that you've seen this slide, welcome to the application process. So the application for round 2 is broken down into 2 phases, the pre-application and full application. And as you see here, again, the pre-application has 2 windows. So window 1 is open right now and will close on July 21st. And window 1 is the only period where you can make TA requests. Window 2 opens on July 1st, and you do not have the option to request TA. And all applicants will receive a link to the full application as part of their pre-application feedback. I'll keep this slide open for a couple more seconds to write down notes if you would like. And speaking of the review process for the pre-application window 1, we have feedback for the pre-application, which will include TA allocation if requested, the preliminary priority points assessment, and overall feedback for your initial concept. Feedback will be broken down into 3 different structures as shown in the last cell on the chart. The green level means that you're okay with proceeding to the full application and you meet all the preliminary criteria. And then the yellow level means that your application needs attention, given some preliminary criteria were not met. And finally, the red level means that your application contains significant issues and does not meet the basic eligibility criteria to receive points in the full application. And regardless of the color level that you receive, all applicants will be able to proceed to the full application and submit the full application itself. Yeah, speaking of which, in terms of the full application scoring, we are going to score your complete proposal based on the following sections. The narrative section consists of a project overview question, program values questions, and the implementation of your funding priorities totaling 75 points out of 100 points possible. The workbook section consists of a work plan and budget that will be scored out of 20 points. And after the full application deadline, which is October 13th, applications that received high scores will be able to proceed to an interview that will be scored out of 10 points. I'll leave that slide open for a couple more seconds. And in terms of our eligible and ineligible costs, with the guidelines, we were able to determine what's eligible and not eligible. So in terms of eligible costs, this includes the following: matching funds, advance pay, post-award supporting activities, personnel and staff, infrastructure and construction, travel, supplies, materials, and indirect costs that do not exceed the 15% maximum limit. Ineligible costs are deemed to be the following. These include indirect costs exceeding the 15% maximum limit, activities that do not advance the awarded project, land purchases, water trucks and trailers, or direct cash benefits and subsidies for participants. Additional ineligible costs are also available in the guidelines for further details. Can leave this slide up as well for a few more seconds. Yeah, I would now like to hand things off to Hannah Bliska from the Climate Services team and student assistant Kiri Basher. They will now share a demo of how to assess if you're likely to obtain priority funding points.
Thank you so much, Angelo, and good morning, everyone. So now that the HEAT team has introduced the priority groups for funding, we are going to show you how you identify the status of the community your project is benefiting. And this status will let you know if your project is benefiting one of the funding priority groups for this grant program. So based on the slide you saw earlier, you are all aware that priority groups get different points. And so it is really important to keep that in mind when you are applying and collecting the status of your community. You will only be able to select one funding priority group. Tribes receive 15 points. Severely disadvantaged communities receive 15 points. Vulnerable populations receive 12 points. And disadvantaged communities receive 10 points. So we are discussing this today because we will ask you to record the status of the community your project is benefiting in the pre-application. And this is because we want to give you an idea of if your project will be awarded the priority points in the full application. In the full application, there will be a lot more that goes into certifying if the benefits your project provides are in fact meaningful and direct to that community. But at the pre-application stage, this at least gives you the idea if you are likely to be awarded those points based on the status of your community. So for tribes, this is a very straightforward assessment. All you will need to do in the pre-application window is to record the name of the tribe your project is benefiting. The tribe must be on the Native American Heritage Commission's list. One of the funding priority groups is severely disadvantaged communities, also known as SDACs. We also have disadvantaged communities, also known as DACs. These are both defined by the climate bond. This is an income-based measure, and the bond program at the Natural Resources Agency built a mapping tool to identify what DACs are present and what SDACs are present. The link to this tool is available in our guidelines. I'm now going to demonstrate how you would use it. So when you open the map, you can search for the community that your project is benefiting. Say I am implementing a project in a neighborhood in Coachella that will benefit those residents. I've searched here in the upper right-hand corner for Coachella. and I have identified my community shown in blue. Here is the information that I need to record. The status at the top, highlighted in yellow, which shows overall status as DAC, and below, also highlighted in yellow, the census tract GeoID, which helps us understand which community you have selected. I will put those into my pre-application, and that is all I would need to record at this stage. I will now pass it off to my colleague Kiri, who will talk about vulnerable populations.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Hannah. So the final funding priority group is vulnerable populations. So we use the Vulnerable Communities platform to identify these priority groups. This platform categorizes climate hazards and social vulnerability into low, medium, and high categories. So to receive the 12 priority points, your selected community needs to have a combination of high and medium scores for climate and social vulnerabilities, or high for both. So more simply, they need high, medium, high scores to receive points as seen on this legend. So now we'll look at how to find your community's vulnerability. Awesome. Okay, so once you navigate to the map, ensure the now time frame is selected at the top of the panel on the left-hand side. So directly to the right, you'll see all of the hazards on the map. Ensure you have extreme heat clicked. So now find your community and click its location on the map. The pop-up will appear, which is this white box as seen on the right-hand side. So in the bolded title will be the block group number. Record this for your application. And at the top of this pop-up, you'll see a table with the community's social and climate scores. Find the extreme heat and record your community's climate now score and social score and record it for the application. In this example, the community has high climate now, extreme heat, and high social. So they would receive the 12 priority points.
Thank you, Kiri. So we know that there is going to be a lot of catch up for folks to learn how to use these tools that are new. We really suggest using the resources listed here on this slide. First, our guidelines have a comprehensive user guide to outline how folks can use these tools to identify the status of the community their project is benefiting. And later this summer, the group will be offering office hours at which Kiri and I will be present to help folks use the tools. Thank you, and I'll pass it back to the HEAT team.
Thank you, Hannah. I will continue with the next set of slides, and I have lost power to move them. So Angela, I'm going to ask you to please click next when. Thank you so much. Let me. Sorry, everyone. I'm just trying to deal with. Angela, can you confirm that you can still that you all can see your sharing screen, because I can't.
You can still see. Are you still able? You can't anymore, you said?
I think I can see it now. It's just very small. All right. Thank you, everyone, for your patience. Now I round 2 timeline. We launched our final guidelines at NOFA just this month, June 16, and with that, we also open our pre-application window 1. So if you already have an initial concept for your project, we encourage you to submit a pre-application form as soon as possible, even if you are not requesting technical assistance. The pre-application window will close on July 21st, and we will be providing feedback and outcomes for those that requested TA the week of August 10th. We'll have a second window of pre-application forms, and that one will open July 1st. If you want to submit a full application form, you must submit a pre-application form. When we provide you with feedback, you will also receive a link to the full application form. So this is a necessary step. The deadline for a full application is October 13, And from there, it will be on us to move very quickly towards the next steps of the scoring process, because we want to make an announcements and awards early 2027 ahead of the heat season, so people can start planning the implementation of their grants. Next, please. We have other climate resilience funding opportunities. The Transformative Climate Community Round 6 is also open, and the Community Resilience Center Round 2 is also open, and they're open until September 2026. There are a lot of intersections with climate and extreme heat work, so we encourage you to attend those events and take a look at their guidelines to see if your project will be a better fit for them. Next, please. Office hours. We are here to help. In our website, you'll have a link to all of our events, which include office hours, so you can start marking your calendar. You can ask questions about any topic that was blurry today and seek additional support to understand our values. Next, please. And please know that we're taking notes. We are using a tracker where we are recording all of your questions, both those that are written that can be a chat, and also those that come to webinars and office hours. And those that are trending are recorded in the FAQ that we update, that we will update very frequently and will be posted on our website and also be shared via e-blasts. Next, please. As I said before, we have multiple upcoming events. The next one is a second session of this run through of the guidelines. So please feel free to come again. And if you were kind to do so, if we haven't covered a specific part of the guidelines that you were curious about, please put that on the chat. We love your feedback in terms of what is still unclear, so we might expand on those topics for our second session. And then I will ask you to please take your phone, take a screenshot of this so you can start planning to attend our upcoming events. With that, I will ask Angelo to stop sharing for a little bit. We are at the hour for Q&A. I'll invite my colleague Braden, as well as my colleagues Hannah and Kiri, to come on camera. So we'll start answering your questions, and I will be the facilitator. Braden, this first question is for you. We have, what are the responsibilities of a CBO applicant?
This is of a lead applicant? I'm not sure I really.
Co-applicant.
Oh, if a CBO is a co-applicant where there's a government lead, what are the potential responsibilities of that co-applicant is really dependent on what you want to get out of that partnership. But the idea is that the CBO is there to support community engagement activities, to support the process of identifying and creating a link between the most vulnerable people in your community that your infrastructure and your planning efforts are targeting, and making sure that those connections between community and the local government are being made. And so, there's specific tasks like task 2 that we would be expecting to see the CBO co-applicant playing a role. Kelly, anything you want to add there?
No, that is perfect. Thank you so much. We have another one in terms of eligibility. Is community engagement and outreach ineligible costs limited to just stipends, cash benefits, or does it also include items like food? I can take this one. We have it outlined in the guidelines. It, for the most part, is just limited to stipends and cash benefits. Items like food for events are definitely allowed, and you can reimburse for them. Drayden, this is a question that we always get. Are different departments in the same city able to separately apply, or should the city decide on one project and submit only one application for the city?
Yeah, so jurisdictions are allowed to send in multiple applications. So if you have a parks department that wants to send in an application, that wants to be a lead applicant, but then you also have, a human services department or another department in the city or county, you can apply separately. We're not asking a jurisdiction to pick between their departments.
Thank you so much for that question. And the answer, Braden, is a question that we always get. Now from Danaka Debo, and this is for Hannah and Kiri, to clarify, if there are two proposed sites and one qualifies as an SDAC and the other is a vulnerable population, we will choose only one of those sites communities for our priority designations, but will still be able to include both sites as part of the project.
Thanks, Kelly. And I think you can chime in with anything directly related to the project itself. But I would say for the priority points assessment, you just need to be able to prove in your application narrative that the
Hannah is frozen for me, so maybe Kiri, you can jump in.
Yeah, sorry about that. So just to reiterate what Hannah said, you are able to select, or you have to select just one vulnerable priority population, but make sure it's your strongest population because we're only going to evaluate one. So make sure you have really good narrative responses to ensure that you get those points.
Super, thank you so much, Kiri and Hannah, you're back. We have a question from Alice. Do you have a Native American liaison that we can talk to one-on-one? Braden, do you want to take that one?
Yes, so we do have at LCI Rico Miranda, who is our tribal liaison. So if you're interested in having a meeting with us and him together to talk about a potential tribal application, we're very open to that. We also have as you heard from Kelly earlier, TA resources available that you can get, especially that you can get if you apply in the window one for the pre-application, so that you can have even more support. And we're trying to, tribes will be prioritized in terms of who gets TA. So, but yeah, if you send us an email to the Extreme Heat and we can get a meeting together with Rico and one of our staff members to support your application.
In addition to that, we have also prepared an FAQ specifically for California Native American tribes that are considered in our program for applications. That is the Appendix A of our guidelines, so feel free to take a look as well. And if we weren't able to answer to your questions in that appendix, feel free to email us. The next question, Braden, will also be for you. Will the program fund installation of new park infrastructure that does not directly reduce heat if it is a design with extreme heat resilience in mind and contributes to harm reduction? For instance, a new basketball court made with solar reflective paint or a new picnic table in a shaded area.
Yeah, so the way the guidelines reads, park retrofits are an eligible activity. So if you're retrofitting a park with amenities that include shade and cooling, those would be eligible activities.
And to add to that, while there are eligible activities, please keep in mind that we do have very specific questions on harm reduction as part of the application. So that is one logical path between how do we avoid harm reduction from extreme heat that your solution has to be able to answer. So that's important as well to keep in mind at the moment of deciding whether application for our program makes sense or not. This
Yeah, so
one
to be
is,
specific, like we would want to know that you're trying to specifically protect athletes from extreme heat, and that's why you're investing in the basketball court. Or, we're going to be wanting you to think about why you're proposing those investments and that they are tied to harm reduction. Yep. Thanks, Kelly.
thank you. That was perfectly said. Hannah and Kiri, given that our proposed project might involve multiple sites, we would like clarification on how selecting a single funding priority group in the pre-application affects our flexibility. If we select one priority group at this stage, does this limit us from selecting additional project sites during the full application phase, so long as all selected sites meaningfully and directly benefit the chosen priority community? That's a lot of question. I'm going to give you a couple of seconds to react to that. It's on our FAQ, but I really appreciate this question. We get it all the time, and I also appreciate the person's in-depth knowledge of the guidelines already. So thank you for that. And Hannah and Q, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Kelly, and apologize for the connection earlier. So what I would say to this question is that the meaningful and direct benefits assessment is a high bar. And so we really want applicants to select the priority funding group for the community that their project is in fact meaningfully and directly benefiting. You will need to provide sufficient evidence throughout the narrative part of your full application to give us confidence and certify that that community that you are claiming is in fact meaningfully and directly benefiting from the project. So it makes sense to then, when you're selecting your funding priority groups, to use the status that is of the communities that are in fact benefiting really directly from your project. We understand that there might be multiple sites involved in your project, and so it makes sense to choose the one that both has the most points for your project, but also that you will be able to show will really benefit from your project as well. So that is our best advice, is to start with where your project is really benefiting and move from there, because we're going to ask for more than just the status of the community, but in fact, a clear demonstration that that community is meaningfully and directly benefiting. In the pre-application phase, we're just trying to give you a sense of if the community status is one of our funding priority groups, and you will be able to change in the full application if you would like to modify your answers, or if your project has changed a bit and you'd like to change your answers, you can do that. But we encourage folks to have a really clear idea, because the pre-application is a great opportunity for you to at least get a sense of if you are on track to receive those funding priority points for your project.
Thank you so much, Hannah. And I will refer you to the Appendix F of the guidelines, where Hannah and Kiri have done a great job in offering transparency on how the assessment of funding priority points will take place if you have any doubts, and where in the application they will look for evidence to ensure that those meaningful criteria are met. Not just if you qualify as a funding priority group, but how they are assessing whether or not those benefits actually are taking place. Hannah, I think this is also for you. By community, you mean geographic community, like census tracts, yes?
That is a great question. So in the two tools that we provide, there are different geographic units that you can use. In the Vulnerable Communities platform, we provide the option to use block groups or census tracts to identify vulnerable populations. In the Natural Resources Agency's Climate Bond tool for DACs and SDACs, there are a variety of geographic unit comparisons that happen. And that is why it makes the most sense in our demonstration to use the overall status, which gives you an idea of if that geographic unit you have selected does in fact qualify as a DAC or an SDAC.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hannah. I'll go ahead and very quickly answer to this question, whether different sites are. Can I confirm if there are geographic boundary restrictions for the site of the project? Can a project include multiple sites? Yes, a project can definitely include multiple sites. Braden, this will be for you. Can we include a contingency rate in the infrastructure budget, or solely costs directly tied to construction materials and installation activities are allowed? So it really is about contingency.
Yeah, currently I don't think the guidelines have a published contingency rate. So I think you would need to send us an email and we need to just make a determination that we would put in the FAQ. So I can't answer the question fully at this time, but really appreciate you asking it, and we will publish an official answer in our FAQ. Kelly, does that work?
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much, Braden. From Maddie Young, hello. If an applicant is working with a partner who will install a microgrid, can they fold that partner's staff time, for instance, pre-development and infrastructure coordination, into infrastructure costs, or must that be included in partners?
Yeah, that's a question. I don't want to get into the full details in this space, but we're happy to publish an answer to that question in our FAQ.
Yeah, sounds good. Maddie, thank you so much for your question. Please keep an eye on our FAQ. We will send in a link once we publish all of these questions. We will be sending a link to everyone who registered and participated in this meeting to ensure that you have access to your answers as well. From Samantha, if I understand the guidelines correctly, the planning document will have to be more of a citywide assessment of cool infrastructure. If we want to build a cool hub at one site in a city, it will need to be identified in the planning document. Then later we could go for implementation. Is that correct?
I answered that question via text. The cool corridor example is just an example we used in this demonstration. We have a definition in the grant guidelines under the early infrastructure grant type. So that's section 3, where we detail the types of plans that we can fund. So I recommend that you go to that. And then if you want to have a more detailed conversation, we can do that in office hours.
Perfect. From Andrew Nelson, can you talk about the definitions of extreme heat and whether the measures are relative or absolute, and are funding decisions taking into account the relative impacts of extreme heat by geography?
Hannah, do you want to talk about that in terms of the VCP or?
Sorry, the connection. Kelly, could you repeat the question, please? Thank you.
Of course. Can we talk about the definitions of extreme heat and whether extreme heat and whether that measures are relative or absolute? Are funding decisions taking into account the relative impacts of extreme heat by geography?
Yes, that is such a great question. So for the Vulnerable Communities Platform, which informs the definition of vulnerable populations, which is the one funding priority group that really focuses on the climate vulnerability of communities, we do look at projections of extreme heat, and that is across the state of California. So the communities that show up as vulnerable populations do in fact have higher heat hazard in the Vulnerable Communities Platform. That being said, it's also combined with social data that help us understand about the adaptive capacity of that community. So even though a community may only have medium heat hazard when compared to other communities across California, if they have high social vulnerability, they will qualify as a vulnerable population via the VCP. I think as a whole, the reason that we have these multiple funding priority groups is because that we're recognizing that just one funding priority group is not enough to capture the vulnerability of communities to heat. And we want to take a larger view of that. And so even if your community is not a vulnerable population, we understand that your community might be a severely disadvantaged community, or it might be a tribe, and that those communities are also vulnerable and need to be supported by our program.
Thank you so much, Hannah. I completely lost track of time. I've been a bad facilitator. We have 1 minute left, and I'm going to ask you, Angelo, to please put that last slide on the screen so I may talk to it. we have 5 questions left, and I promise we will answer them via our track, and you'll receive a link seeing your question as you typed it with an answer attached to that. Thank you so much for being in this first session with us. We know it's a lot. The guidelines are already published on our website. This is not the only session where we'll be helping to analyze the guidelines with you and provide feedback to your project. Please attend our office hours, come to the event, send us emails. We have a really good logistics for making sure that we're answering each one of your questions. Our newsletter is there. Please, if you haven't signed up, please do so now. And as always, email us to extreme.heat@lci.ca.gov, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.